Hey, welcome to Blade Saga. My name is Daniel, otherwise known as ricekombo, and I just got back from GenCon, so let's talk about what I did, who I met, and what I got.
Welcome to Blade-Bound Saga.
So yeah, just got back from GenCon, and it was one of the most fun GenCons I've had in all the times I've been going. I live in Indy, so GenCon is right in my back door, and so I try to go every year that I can, having only missed a couple times since I started going, and so I think this would be my 7th GenCon if I counted correctly. That being said, I got to meet some really cool people, play some really cool games, and I got a good amount of stuff at the expo hall that I usually don't get and grab. And so this video is going to be a little bit more low key, not really going to have a script to it, just going to talk about what I did when I did it and just shout out a couple people. So that being said, I went all 4 days. First day was kind of slow. We originally had a game scheduled that we decided not to go to just because we wanted to check out the expo hall right when it opened up. And so looking in the expo hall, found a lot of cool things, and actually purchased my first piece of art that I've ever purchased at any convention. It was and I'll kind of put the video or the picture somewhere over here. It's essentially a Calamity art piece by Tyler Warpal. I ended up getting the canvas print. I don't have it with me because since it was canvas, they were just going to send it to me. So put my information, and so I should be getting that in the mail sometime soon, hopefully. And that'll be put up on the wall behind me. But essentially, it was a Calamity piece for those who know Critical Role. I just don't see that on convention floors very often, at least Calamity artwork. I see a lot of Vox Machina or lots of Mighty Nine, but not a lot of Calamity. And so when I saw it, it just felt right. It had that same kind of style of comic book and Cartoon Network kind of vibes with Justice League that I remember growing up with, but also with a fantasy twist. It also had a really cool and very well done tri-meaning with the ring of brass in the center, also representing the wedding bands of Laren and Loquacious, but also representing Xerxes's halo right above him. I just really love that play, and ended up convincing me to get that piece of art for the first time, which I don't usually buy art at these conventions. After that, just explored a little bit, found a couple things that I thought I might want to come back to. Ended up kind of keeping myself as close to a budget that I possibly can, given the fact that you could probably spend hundreds and tens of thousands of dollars on the expo hall floor itself. But after that, we ended up playing a game. And so, before I go through the games I played, one of the missions that I had for this year at Gen Con was playing systems that I've never played before. Just wanted to give it a try. I know how to play D&D. I know how to play, obviously, Daggerheart for those who've been following the content on the channel in the past. But I just want to try a bunch of other systems. I did end up playing Daggerheart because I don't get to play as a player very often. So I just wanted to see how other GMs GM the system, and it was extremely rewarding and extremely satisfying when I ended up playing. That being said, I'll just kind of go through the games and the events and the stuff I did in order. First thing I did was play Avatar Legends. So Thursday afternoon, about 2 o'clock, I think, me and a friend who's local, shout out to Zach if you're watching this, we ended up playing Avatar Legends. So basically a TTRPG in the Avatar universe, very similar to Powered by the Apocalypse, so any kind of that system. So essentially you are a group of benders or non-benders, but just someone with a specialty that are tasked in going out on a quest. Specifically, we were tasked in capturing the pirate queen Tagaka, who, for those familiar with Avatar lore, was a leader of the Five Nations, and this was set during the Kyoshi era. So something that you don't necessarily see in the TV shows, but is definitely expounded in some of the lore and in some of the books, which I which I just read a few months before, back in April. So I was really excited to explore this universe. Ended up playing a firebender, but specifically a combustion bender. So taking the lore from that, it was really fun, and it's definitely geared towards kids. There was not any sort of killing of bad guys, killing of bandits, killing of pirates, and then etc. Definitely encouraged you to shift someone's moralities or knock someone unconscious, instead of the typical slaying the bad guy like you typically would. And it was a really fun system, even though it basically was a powered by the apocalypse system. Gave a lot of the players agency on how they created and crafted their character, and for a one shot, was really fun. I think the biggest highlight of that one shot, and really just shout out to Magpie Games and the event organizers, was a system essentially to reset the room's volume. Essentially, if anybody was ever overwhelmed, overstimulated, someone just raised their hand. Basically, then everyone else started to raise their hand around the room, and everyone just quieted down. If you've been to Gen Con or any of the events, or any convention before, those rooms can get fairly loud, especially when you're playing TTRPGs. So I really appreciated that they had a system like that. Definitely the highlight. Almost ended up buying Avatar Legends, but at least for the groups that I end up running with, it just was not a system that I felt like I was going to be able to convince other people to play, in comparison to some of the other fantasy or high fantasy tabletop RPGs that I usually play. So that was basically Thursday in terms of games I played. I did end up having a blast that evening, catching up and connecting with the Pocket Dimension for the first time. Friends of the channel and friends of the Discord, another YouTube channel that essentially has been playing in some of my games, but also just built a great community of themselves. The friend that I was with, Zach, that I mentioned earlier, had a really good time connecting with some of them, especially talking to AK and Matt over at the Pocket Dimension with ADHD 20, which is their podcast that they had. They really connected, and I thought it was really cool to just have that experience of just having that shared collective experience of having ADHD. So that was really cool. We ended up going to a ramen restaurant called Strange Bird. It was really fun. Got to connect with Kai Solis, who was a GM that would GM later for us later on Saturday, and then also connected with another friend from that I've met through Pocket Dimension, Will, who was also helping out in the expo hall with one of his friends. That being said, Thursday was just a really easy day to start the con. Then comes to Friday, which Friday started off super early, waking up at 6:30 just so I could purchase the D&D 2024 edition Player's Handbook for the early release. So those went live at 7, woke up, was the second person to have their wish list processed, and so then we had to book it to the convention hall because we drove from my place over to the halls, made it in line at 9 a.m. and basically just waited and bought the Player's Handbook. So the Player's Handbook right now is actually sitting at my desk at the school, since I am a moderator for our D&D club. And so I'm excited to bring that to the students a little bit earlier than the normal release would have been. So it's going to be cool to crack that open. Probably do a couple reviews about what's going on in the Player's Handbook over the next couple weeks, at least on the channel. So I have that in my pocket. Excited to break into it and look into what is really new with the new 2024 Player's Handbook. That being said, there is a couple of those like mini rants, or I'll give you a couple mini rants about the release schedule for all the 2024 edition things. It is just super weird that the Player's Handbook is released, and then we still have to wait 3 months for the Dungeon Master's Guide to be released for the 2024 edition, and then another 3 months for the Monster Manual to be released. Kind of just odd that we have the players' tools, but then the GM doesn't have an updated tool set, because at least from what I've been reading, what I've been looking at, what I've been watching, the players have a lot better options. Definitely some buffs on a lot of the classes, like the monk, like the ranger, though there are some controversies with Hunter's Mark and even with the paladin and smite. But for the most part, every class got bumped up a little bit in terms of what they're able to do. And so not having that those monsters as well kind of feels a little weird, and I wish Wizards of the Coast would have released it all as kind of one package like they have done in the past. That being said, after getting that early release book, went straight to my first game in the morning at 10, where I played Candela Obscura for the first time. And boy, it is a comfy system because it basically uses the Blades in the Dark D6 system. So kind of already played the game, given the fact that I've played Blades before. But the thematic tone of Candela fit more of that 1920s partial steampunk electricity just being discovered, but also with that eldritch twist. So for those familiar with Call of Cthulhu, it kind of has a little bit of those vibes, and it's really weird for me, given the fact that I love Daggerheart and have GM'd over 60 games at this point, even though the releases has for the open beta was only this year. I've played that game played Daggerheart so much that it would be so odd that I just did not really touch Candela. But initially, I guess in my watching of Candela, I wasn't necessarily intrigued or pulled in like some of the other Let's Plays for Daggerheart. But as a player, I was pleasantly surprised with the style of game it was, the investigation, and not wanting to directly engage with the big bad evil eldritch horror. And because we were all basically just humans, in like real life humans who were very susceptible to death, it really made us think outside the box of how we wanted to seal the beast or the shadow beast that was kind of haunting the plummet hall. Essentially was the area we were in. So Candela was just a very pleasantly surprising game that I ended up playing, and I ended up buying a copy of the handbook. So really excited to crack into that, and I am planning on playing some of the games in the Candela system and Candela universe. After that, we spent a little bit of time in the expo hall. Nothing too crazy. Just ended up buying the book there right after. But then we ended up going to just a lunch, and then following that, played my first game of Vampire the Masquerade. So, Vampire the Masquerade. Initially, very rocky start. We ended up walking in, and apparently the convention, either GenCon or the organizers for Vampire, either sold additionally or someone snuck in, but there ended up being like an off balance on tables. So while we were the last two people to join into a vampire game, we also were one extra chair, or one chair where that there was not a person to sit. And so what the event organizers did, which I will give them props to, was they basically made a completely new table for us. It was me, my friend Zach again, and then two other people, a staff member, and then someone they were able to pull from another table. We ended up doing a kind of impromptu session of Vampire the Masquerade. I'm not even sure if it was the exact same module that we signed up for, but it ended up being a blast. The system itself took a lot, at least for me, to learn and understand, given the agency, the time period that we were in. It was set in a modern day setting, so we all had phones, but we were all given a persona. And I think initially when I selected the character sheet, I imagined them to be kind of this like master manipulator, which they had aspects of it that they were able to do, but it kind of led, in terms of the abilities that I had, to be more of a seductress, which it just isn't my style of play. And so while I really like the system of Vampire the Masquerade, the agency that it gives the players, the kind of open-endedness and the lore that it gave, the character I chose was just really hard to play for me. I'm just not that type of player. And so it took me a while to really kind of understand the character, eventually kind of leaning into it a little bit more, ended up having a little bit more fun towards the end. And I definitely would try Vampire the Masquerade again, but it does not feel like a type of game that I'd want to play online. And even more so, it wouldn't feel like a game that I really want to GM before trying it again as a player. I feel like if I were to try the game once more, maybe picking a different character, understanding it a little bit more, maybe going through character creation itself, I might have a little bit more buy-in for the game, but at least for my experience when I was playing it, I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan. Um, though I understand the appeal, and I think the event organizers were great, and the really amazing highlight of that game was really just their ability to pivot. So, um, yeah, that ended up Friday. Ended up grabbing a bite to eat late at night before going to bed. But then we ended up going into Saturday, taking a really slow day, not making it to the event hall, not even making it to the food trucks. We basically just grabbed some coffee and just sat in a coffee shop early in the morning before making it to our 10 o'clock game, which, like I said before, our 10 o'clock game was hosted by Kai Solis, who has been working with Cobalt Press and GMing for games at our tables at games for them for some time, and I ended up having dinner with them over on Thursday, and so it was cool to finally sit at the table, experience Kai's GMing, along with Will, who I met before, my friend Zach once again, who basically was there the whole time for the convention, as well as two people from the Proc Convention, AK and Matt, who we just had a blast. Tales of the Valiant, for those who don't know, is essentially a Wizards of the Coast free 5e esque game. For those who've played 5e, if you jump into a Tales of the Valiant game, you're basically jumping into the same game with a little bit of some extra flavors, like one of the rules where if you fail the check, you get a luck point, which is essentially kind of like a mini inspiration, where if you can get up to 5 luck points. You can use individual luck points to increase your roll by 1, or you can spend 3 luck points to re-roll just like inspiration. And so it was a system that basically encouraged or wasn't incredibly punishing if you failed. But I ended up playing a Kobold Bard, or a Kobold's Warlock, which oddly enough is my third time I've played a Kobold Warlock in any Gen Con game, which is just interesting that combination constantly pops up. But I ended up playing a really supportive, kind of changing my face, mind controlling, and charming enemies using command, and kind of a more crowd control and kind of more of a chaotic kobold rather than just a hit things with Eldritch Blast warlock. That being said, such a fun game just to be up with people that you know, and thanks for the event organizers for allowing us to come in as a group of 5. It was just a really fun game to play. So really comfy. After that, we had a little bit of a break, grabbed some food, and then headed to where I will definitely say is the highlight of my con, which was playing Daggerheart. As you know, I am a GM for Daggerheart. Once again, I've played at least 60 games of Daggerheart, and this GM, Daniel Lena, something like that, was our GM, and did an incredible job teaching us the game. Obviously, I know how to play. Obviously, I've taught other people how to play Daggerheart before, but he was incredibly thorough about it, and really took our time, especially with some of the players at our table that haven't played Daggerheart. I felt like as we took a little bit of extra time to learn the rules, once we got into the game, there wasn't a whole lot of asking, hey, how does this work? How does armor score work here? What kind of roll can I do if I want to do this? Everyone kind of just, to an extent, understood kind of the flow of the game. That being said, I was part of an experimental group. I don't know if we were the only table where we tried the new post-beta experimental rules, where they basically removed the action tracker, which at the table it took me a while. I had to basically unlearn all that I knew of Daggerheart and learn this new system, and I was very much fighting it a little bit. So kind of similar to how some people come into 5e going into Daggerheart, they have to unlearn 5e to learn Daggerheart. I was basically unlearning Daggerheart to learn experimental Daggerheart. Essentially, the system removed the action tracker in efforts to make it where the GM can kind of chime in using fear whenever anybody fails, but rather than making attacks based off of a number of action tokens that the GM received, it was fear-based or based off of what the enemies were able to do. So we were fighting wyverns for this fight, and essentially when the wyvern took their turn, he was able to utilize fear to use a slam ability and then make the wyverns attack individually. So that being said, I actually don't mind the change and the idea of removing the action tracker. Given the fact that when a player rolls with hope, they gain the hope. When a player rolls with fear, I as a GM gain a fear. In combat, that then change when somebody makes an action, then the GM gets an action and a fear if it's a fail, or the player gets a hope. And I think for simplicity, for new players, the two new players at our table understood the system, and it made total sense to them because they had nothing else to learn. Or I guess the three new players. That being said, shout out to the people I was playing with. I played with Matt and AK against from the Pocket Dimension, but I also played with Jakin from Swordplay and Sorcery, another YouTuber that has kind of made a name, more so diving into DC20 as of recent. Been watching his content, and we were all basically fans of each other, which was really fun. Really cool to just kind of have that experience playing with people that you know. Once again, and so anyways, that being said, the three new players, so Jakin and the other two players that we were with, they kind of took to understanding the system, and it made perfect sense to them. And so I think removing an action token and action tracker in Daggerheart isn't a bad thing. The only caveat I'll say to that is if you do that, you do have to rework a handful of domains and definitely a good chunk of adversaries, especially those adversaries that have something like slow, where it requires 2 action tokens to activate an attack. Or another one would be things just costing multiple actions, like summoning creatures. Those would have to be tweaked because you don't have the action itself. So changing it to costing fear or making it a free action, that's probably something that you'd have to do. And I'm interested to see if this ends up being the direction that they want to go with in terms of Darrington Press. But yeah, that being said, amazing GM, really fun role play at a table. We were all role playing with each other, so those are always magical when you're at a convention with friends or strangers where you get to kind of role play a lot. That's my preferred style of play. I am a role play heavy GM after all, and so. The highlight of my Gen Con was definitely playing Daggerheart. It was the one game I was familiar with, but it was just a really fun game. And so I ended Saturday with one more game. We learned a board game called Till the Last Gasp, which is another Darrington Press created project. Basically a board game that does incentivize a lot of role playing as you're basically at a duel with your opponent. So you get some drama cards essentially that help dictate what is the prompt that your character has to go into and say, and then what that next moment of combat, you're kind of startling your characters or rattling them is the actual in-game mechanic, but then also using dice to gain actions for you to be able to utilize. It was a really fun game, and I've actually had it since the game released, just never played it because I just never got the chance to learn it and then also teach it to other people that I want to play it with. But now I know how to play, and so I'm excited to bring that into parties with friends at home. And then Sunday, I always take Sunday as kind of a very relaxed and chill day and actually it's family day since my kids have been born, and so my kids ended up coming out. I ended up buying my 3-year-old some swords that he just had a blast with and still has a blast with, and then we bought some like 3D printed dragons for my boys, and so con ended really chill, really relaxed. Said goodbye to the Pocket Dimension, and just having a lot of fun. So overall, Gen Con was a blast. Definitely would do it again. Definitely plan on making it next year. And hopefully to a couple more cons and kind of leave Indiana to do some other things. So with that being said, that is the end of this video. So if you made it this long, thank you for hearing me and my rambles on my own. And with that being said, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you did if you were at Gen Con, or any games that you're interested in playing. Just leave them down in the comments. Don't forget to join the Discord. And if you want to play with me, go ahead and go to startplaying.games /GM ricekombo, and all my games are listed on there. So with that being said, I'll see you guys later. Bye.
From ink and steel, stories are forged. We are Blade-bound Saga.